Howdy, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll give people a couple more minutes to join. But in the meantime, if anyone has any questions, we can just answer some quick questions. Or we can do a fun welcome to the workshop activity too. So you're welcome to leave your videos on or off, whatever you feel more comfortable with. You're welcome to use the chat or to turn your microphones on to ask a question. And while we wait for a few more people to join us, we'll start in a couple of minutes. I just want to make sure nobody gets left out of the beginning. So while we wait, let's do a comment cascade. Has anyone done those before? So what we're going to do is we're going to type an answer into the chat, but we're not going to hit send until we all hit send together. So I'll give you a question, you'll type your response into the chat, and then we'll all hit send when I tell you. So my question today is, what is your favorite breakfast? So if you were able to eat like your ideal breakfast, what would that be? So go ahead and type your answer into the chat, but don't hit send yet. All right, everyone have their answer ready? Three, two, one, hit send. Ooh, oh, yum. Oh, amazing. Avocado toast, eggs and potatoes, chilaquiles, pancakes. Ooh, crepes. I just found out that you can buy crepes pre-made at the store, and then you can put them in your refrigerator and make easy crepe breakfast or desserts. Life changer. Omelet and toast, waffles, delicious. Leftover pumpkin pie. That's my official favorite. That's wonderful. Full English. Ooh, amazing. I've never had a full English. It looks delicious. It sounds delicious. I might skip the blood sausage, but the rest of it sounds amazing. All right. I think we've given people enough time. We'll keep an eye on the waiting room so we can let more people in as they come in. But let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, welcome. I hope you're all expecting this to be a workshop that is about writing your research journal articles in a STEM field. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what types of STEM fields y'all are in. So let's do another comment cascade and just go ahead and put into the comment box, but don't hit send yet, what your field is. You can put a general field if you want, or you can put a more specific area if there's a particular area that you're in that's part of a subfield or something like that. So go ahead and type your response in, and then we'll hit send in just a minute. What STEM field are you in, or subfield? Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Excellent. Civil engineering, agriculture, plant ecology, plant pathology, biochemistry, avian immunology. That sounds very cool. Oh, wonderful mix today. I love it when we have a lot of great representation from all across the STEM fields. Very cool. So what we're going to work on today is a method that I like to use to figure out how to write something really well in a like a new writing situation. So anytime that I have to write something that's kind of new to me, either for a new journal or a new type of article, this is the method that I use. It's a really helpful method, and you can apply it across a huge number of different writing scenarios that you're in. It should be something that you can adjust to your own particular interests, to the particular research that you're interested in writing. It can be something that you can adjust to use at whatever point you're in the writing process. So if you already have a journal article started, if you've written an article draft, but you want to revise it and get it really ready to send, you should be able to use this. Same thing if you're just at the beginning, you have a project, you've done some research, but you want to know, how do I write up the article to get it published in that journal that I'm aiming for? This will be a really useful thing. You can also use the ideas from this to like start drafting out a prospectus or a proposal. It's useful for all sorts of things. So let's get a little bit of an idea of where y'all are at in the writing process. Are you at this point working on a journal article? Are you thinking about a journal article? Are you conducting research? Or have you already drafted one and want to revise? We'll go ahead and take a minute, type your response in, and then we'll all send together. Okay, and go ahead and send. Drafting, revising, conducting research, research proposal, great. Just about to start, starting soon, drafted, almost drafted, thinking, very rough draft, great. Okay, fantastic. It'll be really helpful to hear from everyone at the different stages that you're at, and we'll be able to have some time to think about what's been working for each of you and what questions you have in your particular areas. But we'll also talk about, you know, this process that you can apply at any point as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now. And I'm going to walk you through the process of using genre analysis. Have any of y'all heard of genre analysis before? No? Okay. All right. You've probably been doing something similar to this in other situations, but this is just going to give you a really formalized process that you can use anytime you need to and give you some ways to articulate it and have some strategies. Let me share my screen. There we go. And we'll put it in present mode. Perfect. And we'll start at the actual beginning. There. Excellent. Can everyone see the screen okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. Okay, so here's how we're going to break up the time for this workshop. We're going to spend the first half hour talking about how to analyze a genre. Yes, I will share the link with you halfway through when we hit the second part. So yes, you'll have access to this, of course. Okay, so the first part will be how to analyze a genre. We'll spend the first half hour talking about that. We'll talk about what genre is, why it's useful to think about doing genre analysis, and then we'll do some guided research where I'll have you use the Shields databases or look at a specific journal, find some specific journal articles, and analyze those for what sorts of genre moves the authors are using in effective published articles. And then the last half from 12 to 12:30, we'll be thinking about how you can use similar genre moves. So we'll analyze those articles that we find examples of that you think are really well written, really good explanation of the research that somebody is doing in a field similar to yours. We'll look and see what's making that writing effective, and then we'll take some time to think about how can you use similar strategies at whatever stage you're at in the process. Any questions? Okay, so quick introduction to me first. My name is Dr. Cassie Hemstrom. You can just call me Cassie. That's totally fine. I have a background in all sorts of things. I did an undergrad in the history of the philosophy of science. And then I focused more on the study of writing and composition in grad school. And that's what I teach now, is kind of a combination of those two things. So I do a lot of teaching of upper division undergrad classes that are focused on preparing people to write in the STEM professions or in STEM disciplines. I teach writing in the health sciences. I teach students how to write technical papers, journal articles, etc. I also have the vast benefit of having a complete family of scientists, one of whom is actually a grad student at Davis right now. So I have always really enjoyed learning how to look and see what makes particular types of writing effective and how we can kind of demystify the writing process. I did not have great support on doing that when I was in grad school. So I'm really invested in helping people figure out what strategies work best for them and how you can actually apply those strategies so that you can write the papers that you want to write, publish, and be prepared for whatever your next steps are in grad school. So that's who I am. It would be wonderful if you would type just a very quick introduction to yourself and what you're hoping to get out of this workshop in the chat. Just a very quick, like, what's one main question you have, or what's a reason that you are really interested in getting better at writing a journal article. It's a quick introduction to yourself in the chat. And just take a minute, 1 or 2 sentences, nothing crazy. And when you're ready, go ahead and hit send. Great. Excellent. Fantastic. I'm really excited to have you all here, and I think we'll be able to address the exact questions and interests that brought you to this workshop today. So I'm really excited to work with you on this and to make sure that you have some strategies that are going to work for you. Writing a journal article can seem really daunting, and even after you've written the article, revising it and getting it ready to actually send off can also be really intimidating. So this is a process that, in addition to giving you strategies for the writing, can help you feel really confident in what you're writing as well. So let's go ahead and talk about genre. So genre is the kind of categorization of types of writing that take place in situations that repeat. So a lot of times people find themselves doing the same type of writing for the same reason, with the same type of purpose in mind for similar audiences over and over. And those types of writings, those types of texts that we create, become a genre. They have specific strategies that they use, particular parts, some conventions that people come to expect of them because they've been successful when people have had to write in that genre before, for conveying that particular information, meeting that particular purpose, and meeting that particular audience's needs. So in these situations, a writer needs to write to an audience similar to audiences for whom other writers have written, and strive to achieve a purpose similar to those that other writers have striven to achieve. The writing responses in these situations tend to have similar features. We call these repeating similar responses genres. We're going to use genre awareness today. And by using genre awareness, what we're going to do is examine a genre to see what specific choices the authors make in writing a text in that genre, and analyzing the effectiveness of those choices. Then we can make more informed writing choices ourselves. And again, this is a strategy that you can use in writing anything that you need to write. Grant proposal, proposal for your dissertation project, anything. You can use genre analysis to help you figure out how to write that thing effectively. So if you're interested in some of the scholarly background to genre studies, it's a very common and appreciated approach in the scholarship on teaching writing, because we find it so useful. We can't teach everybody how to teach how to write every type of text that they're ever going to encounter, right? Like I could use this workshop time to teach you how to write one really kick-ass lit review, but maybe you're not writing just a lit review. Maybe you're writing a synthesis paper. Maybe you're writing a primary research paper. Maybe you need to do a methodology paper, right? So I couldn't teach you all of those things in this one workshop time, but what I can teach you is how to teach yourself anytime that you need to learn how to do a new writing situation. So Lloyd Bitzer is one of the first people who introduced us to the idea of genre analysis and using that to figure out how to respond to a writing situation. And he says that due to either the nature of things or convention or both, some situations recur. He uses the example of a courtroom. He says the courtroom is the locus for several kinds of situations, generating the speech of accusation, the speech of defense, the charge of the jury. From day to day, year to year, comparable situations occur, prompting comparable responses. Hence, rhetorical forms are born, a specialized vocabulary, grammar, and style are all established. Let's take a minute and think of some recurring situations in which public officials need to make a comment. And what are some genres that we're used to encountering just in our regular life sphere, that people, these recurring situations that people need to write some sort of response to. Take a second. See if you can come up with something. I'll go first, and then you can just take another minute. So I'm going to say, in this year in particular, we have seen presidential address about national emergencies. That's something that we have seen multiple times. And in fact, there's even a very particular subgenre that is aimed at talking about the COVID crisis. All right, can you come up with ideas? Go ahead and put them in the chat and share when you're ready. Yes, communicating about climate change, build proposals, absolutely. Memes are a great example. Yes. Addresses about natural disasters. And that could be anything from like a news conference to a response from a particular politician. It could be a politician making a plea to have an area declared a disaster zone so that they can get the federal funds and resources that are only dispersed in those areas. Standard operating procedures, absolutely. Tech manuals, all sorts of things like that. Yeah, great examples. These are repeating scenarios that come up and people have to respond to them, and they have very similar reasons that you have to write each time. And so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time that you're going to respond to something like that. You can look and see how other people have responded, and you can figure out which of those responses have gotten the best reactions, which ones have been the most effective in accomplishing all of their purposes. And then you can study and see, okay, why? Why was it effective? What did that speaker or author do to make that particular iteration of the genre so effective? And how can I use similar steps, strategies to meet the audience's need and the need to fulfill that purpose? So Amy Devitt, who's another scholar in the field of genre analysis, tells us that genres develop because they respond appropriately to situations that writers encounter repeatedly. Once we recognize a recurring situation, a situation that we or others have responded to in the past, our response can guided by past responses. Job offers, lease agreements, absolutely. Cover letters, right? Writing a cover letter to get a new internship, to get a new job position. Those are all genres that we know what makes them more or less effective. And once we know that, we can use them for writing our own things. Okay, so some key things to consider when doing a genre analysis. You want to ask yourselves questions in these 5 areas. So the first area is genre. What is this genre? What is the recurring situation that is prompting similar responses from writers? Why are people writing in this genre? And what are the key aspects of this situation? Who's the audience, the purpose in writing, the purpose that the audience has in reading the text? What's the venue of the publication? Is it a written text? Is it produced digitally? Is it in a pamphlet? Does it have graphical elements like tables, or is it strictly in text form? All of that stuff. So that's one thing that you want to start considering. The next is the audience. Who is your intended audience, and what do they need or expect to get from the text? For most situations, you're going to have multiple audiences. You're going to have people who are in different positions reading that text and trying to get different things out of that text. So if you're able to think about who are the different people who have a stake in this text and what do they need from it, you can then better help them get what they need from it. So ask yourself, what is the audience's relationship with the text? What does the audience expect when reading the text? What do they need from this text? And how can I make it easier for them to get what they need? Next, the purpose. What do you want to achieve with this text? And again, you probably have multiple purposes. You probably have a couple of different things you need to achieve. And so by laying those out and articulating them, you can make sure that you're achieving all of those purposes at once. So are you trying to convince your readers to believe something? If so, what? Are you attempting to prove your own credibility? If so, how are you going to do that? And then the next 2 things that you want to think about are the conventions and the moves. So the conventions apply to the genre. What are the conventions of the genre? What are the features of the genre? If I look at a job cover letter, how do I know that it's a cover letter without context, right? If someone handed me their job application cover letter and didn't tell me what it was and said, hey, what's this? Why would I know looking at it that it was a cover letter? Those conventions, the things that occur in every single example of, or at least successful example of that genre, those are conventions. So if I were to look at a cover letter, what are some things you would expect to see? If I handed you a piece of paper and it was a cover letter, what would tell you it was a cover letter? Let's put it in the chat. Contact information, names, credentials, address to somebody, why they're applying, why they're interested in the job. Yep. Explanation of their experience. Yes, even the paragraph structure, right? For most cover letters, especially at like an intro level. So if you're applying for your first academic job, or if you're applying for an internship, it's going to be under 1 page or like just a full page. Yep. Mentioning a job position, usually in the first paragraph, often in the first sentence where you say, I write to apply for this job. Layout and format, absolutely. It's going to be in a very conventional formal letter layout. It's going to be single space. It's going to have 1 space between paragraphs. It's going to have to be readable because we know we don't want them to toss it in the trash if I make my font 6-point font. Yes, all of these things are conventions of the genre. Those conventions can be format, they can be structure, but they can also be strategies that the author is using. So for example, if I wanted to include a thesis statement in the introduction of my cover letter that stated like my main reasons why I'm the best applicant for the job, that's a convention, just the same as the layout is a convention. The name and organization of the recipient. Yes, all of these things are conventions. So the conventions are what have readers come to expect of this genre? What characteristics help them to know a text is in this genre? And what do authors usually choose to do in this genre? And are those choices effective? Why or why not? So those are questions you want to ask yourself when you're doing a genre analysis. And then we're going to break it down even more. And we're going to look at the actual choices that people are making in writing like sentence and paragraph level text. What specific writing tools or choices do writers use to achieve these genre conventions effectively? So these strategies would include common strategies for format, organization, structure, support, and content. So for example, in a common convention is that I need to demonstrate my my qualifications, right? My academic qualifications, my research qualifications. But what moves am I going to use to accomplish that? That's something that you can, something tangible on the page that you can point to and you can say, here is where the author is making the move of trying to demonstrate their academic credentials for this job. You can kind of think of it like making your move to approach someone you're interested in. It's the place where you decide, this is where I'm going for it. I'm going to put it in the text. You can see what my purpose is, and I'm trying to use this piece of the text to achieve my overall goal of this genre. Any questions at this point? Okay, so let's talk about what some common STEM journal article conventions and moves are. And you're going to recognize a lot of these, and I want you to help me add on to any of them. So these are just common ones. This isn't trying to say every single one is included here, but generally, when you're writing a journal article in a STEM field, you start with some sort of a question. You have a provable research question and an appropriate scope for that publication, right? You know that question has to be something that can be adequately addressed in the length of that article. You have a methodology. You're using some sort of a community-approved research method that is known and respected in your field. Or maybe you're presenting a new methodology. That's a different type of paper. You're using research. You're participating appropriately in the field's research community. You are making some sort of argument. You're making a clear, well-supported argument, and you're using straightforward language. You're not writing in prose, right? You're making claims and then you're supporting those claims. You're using evidence to support that claim too. And the clearer and more straightforward you can be about those claims, the more likely it is that your audience will follow and understand both your research, your question, why this question is important, and how you have answered the part of the question that you are answering. I have a suggestion for further reading under here, but I have a whole page at the end of the presentation that has some suggested further reading too. So you can note that down, but it's also at the end. Do these look like familiar conventions of the types of articles that you're used to reading in your field?
Definitely.
Yeah. Pretty familiar, huh? And you know, when you sit down to write an article, you know that these are usually the things you need to do. What can be tricky is figuring out exactly how to do those things. And that's where the genre analysis comes in. So you can say, okay, what are the moves and conventions that those writers are using who are writing really effective publications that are getting published in the journals I want to publish in? And how can I, without like totally copying someone else's style, because that's not the point of this, but how can I figure out what's working and why so that I can use similar strategies? So article format, often IMRAD, right? Starts with an abstract, has an introduction, a methods, might have some additional sections like background, position, apparatus, materials. You have a results section, you have an analysis section. Sometimes the results and analysis are combined. You have your citations that are formatted according to the field style or to the publication style, and then you might have appendices depending on whether you need them or not. Sound familiar?
Well, I have a question. What is the D supposed to mean? I don't see a D on F and G.
Oh,
I see the
discussion.
IMRA.
Oh my gosh, you're so right.
Discussion.
Yes, discussion. Yeah, wow. How did I leave the D off? Results analysis and discussion. And sometimes your discussion can be called a conclusion. Sometimes it can be rolled into your analysis. You know, these are just kind of like the common format, but you can play around with this format as you're comfortable with it. And thanks for asking that question. That was very important. Other questions about this part? Have you written something that is in this format before? Did you know that this format had a name and that there's clear expectations for that format, or were you kind of figuring it out based on something else? Okay. Figuring it out. How did you figure it out? If you didn't know what to do the first time that you sat down to write an article like this, what steps did you use? Looking at other people's examples, based on other articles, based on other papers. Exactly. That's the best way to do it. Journals providing guidelines, also super helpful. Yes. So that's what this approach is. It's just telling you that's the way to figure out how to write things when you don't know how to do it. And it's giving you specific strategies that you can use so you don't have to feel like you're kind of fumbling your way through it. Good. Excellent. So see, this is what I was saying. You've all been doing this already, but maybe you didn't have a name for genre analysis. So having a name, having clear decisions that you're going to make and a clear approach to doing that analysis can be really helpful. All right. So some common article genres in STEM. A lot of the genres that we see for articles are going to be like a state of the field. And these are particular ones that you might write as a grad student too. And some of these are really great for grad students because you can write them before you've conducted your own primary research. And especially in a COVID year, if you need to do field work and you can't get out and do field work, you can still write some of these articles without that primary research. So an example would be the state of the field. You could do a review of the literature. You could do a synthesis. Another type is primary research. So if you have been able to gather your own research, you can write a couple of different types of really common research articles, like introducing new research, expanding on previous research, or critiquing current research. You might also do the same thing with a methodology. You might either introduce a new methodology or show a new application of a common methodology. You might critique a common methodology or point out a problem with it. You might write a technical report. You might do a book review. You might do a comments response to a previously published article. What are some other common types of articles that you have encountered? Can you think of anything that's not included in this? Meta-analysis, yes, absolutely. Brief reports, application papers, yep. Systematic reviews, editorials, yeah, absolutely, for sure. Perspectives, yep. Yes, great. So these are all common genres. And then if they're common genres, that means that you can find well-written examples of them, and you can figure out what those authors did to make them well-written so that you can write your own version. This popped up this week. I'm sure you've all seen it, but if you haven't, it's hilarious and I love it and it fits so perfectly. So I decided I needed to put it in here. And it comes from, of course, the wonderful XKCD. How are synthesis and review similar? That's a great question. Should we go back to the previous slide? So are you talking about the review of the literature and a synthesis article? Yeah. Okay. So does anyone else want to take a stab at answering that question? So those are two different types of state of the field. They are similar, but they have slightly different purposes. Does anyone want to talk about that or share your experience with those? Has anyone written a lit review?
I would say that a review is covering the individual results of papers in the literature, and perhaps analyzing approaches, finding gaps in the literature, things like that. Whereas a synthesis brings together ideas from papers in the literature to come up with something additional.
That's exactly right, James. Yeah, absolutely. So a review of the literature, that's the type of thing where you're going to write if you're doing like a state of the field and you want to tell people, here are the different lines of research that are happening in this field this year. Over the last couple of years, here's where our field has been really interested in. So we've had kind of like these three main areas that people have been asking questions about. Here's a review of the main questions in each of these three areas. And here's some fundamental or really influential pieces that people have written in those, and maybe like some calls for further action or pointing out, here's some gaps in the field where you could add to that new research that's happening. Synthesis, you might start with more of a specific question about, okay, so we know that a lot of people have been exploring this question, but they haven't all been talking to each other. Let's bring together what other people have said so far and pull that together and use the different primary research that other people have conducted to answer a question that no one's applied it to yet. You don't have to conduct any of your own primary research. You're conducting entirely secondary research. So you're analyzing other people's writings and findings, but you're bringing together their work to answer a question. Does that make sense, Arthur? Great, excellent. Okay. So some common, thanks, James. That was very, very clear. So some common conventions that you're going to need to address and make sure that you're meeting if you're going to write a journal article in a STEM field. You're going to have multiple audiences. You're going to, first of all, have the gatekeeper audiences who are going to judge whether or not your paper is going to be published. So you're going to have the reviewers. You're going to have the editor for that journal. You're going to have the people who are looking at the other pieces that have been submitted to that journal for that volume and seeing how they can fit them together to make a conversation. There's a lot of thought that goes into editing together a collection for each volume of a journal publication. And so even if you have really great, really well-written research, if it doesn't fit with that overall conversation, they might tell you, it's not really going where we need it right now. You might try taking it somewhere else. You also have the other scholars that you're addressing, right? The other people who are doing research in this field, the people who have an expert level knowledge in this field. You have professionals in related fields who maybe don't do the research, but who use the research, who apply the research, who are keeping up to date in the research and using it for their work. You have students, either upper division undergrad students or entry-level grad students who have a little bit of knowledge in the field, some threshold knowledge, so they can understand, they can read the writings, but they're still learning what the conversations and what the underlying impetus of the field is. And then you have lay people, right? You have your just person who needs to find information about this particular topic for some reason. They are not an expert in the field. They don't have any training in the field. So they need to figure out how to not only get the information that you are preparing for them, but also navigate their way through a journal article that can be pretty difficult for someone who's not used to reading scholarly articles. You also have science journalists, people whose job it is to relay that information from the experts to the lay people. And that can be really complicated because you want to make sure, especially if you're talking about a kind of controversial point or a point that, a lot of people are invested in, You want to make sure that they are not going to draw false equivalencies. They're not going to make, causation out of correlation. So you need to be really clear for the people who are going to be relaying the most important information from your article to lay people. So thinking about all those different audiences and how you can make sure that you're addressing each of those different audiences' needs can be tricky, but it can also be very, very helpful. And that's a really good thing to pay attention to when you're doing revisions. It's also something to think about when you're starting, because you can use that to kind of think about, okay, well, where do I need to make my claims? What sections do I need to include? And how do I need to do I need to restate and include multiple examples? Do I need to include data, tables, et cetera? Thinking about the audiences and the different ways they'll be using your research is going to be a really helpful factor for deciding what you need to put in. You're also going to have multiple purposes. So some of your purposes will be to share your key findings from your research, or to call for further research, or to call for action. You also, as an emerging scholar in your field, have the purpose of demonstrating your scholarly ethos, creating your claims to credibility based on the depth of knowledge and the breadth of knowledge and your use of research, right? You are also trying to demonstrate your ability to conduct research in this field according to the field's best practices. You're also probably trying to build a publication portfolio, or maybe you need to use this publication as a part of your thesis or dissertation project. Maybe you need to use this as something that you can use to help you get a job. So thinking about all of those different purposes, again, will help you decide what journal do I want to aim for, what approach do I want to take, what genre do I want to use that can help me achieve my purpose in writing about this particular type of research. So some common moves that you're going to find in scholarly articles in the SIM fields. And these are things that you can use yourself as well in order to help you achieve those conventions and those purposes. So one thing you can do is demonstrate a gap in the research or a need to investigate. This is a super helpful thing for writing your introduction, which, by the way, if you haven't learned this very helpful tip, do not write your introduction first, my friends. Write your introduction and your discussion last. Start with something that you know. Start with your methodology, right? Start with your results. And then go back once you've figured out how you're analyzing that information, how you're structuring your piece, what your key purposes is, who your audiences are, and then write the introduction. Don't write that. You can write like a little placeholder introduction to give you an idea about, I think that this is my purpose. I think this is my guiding question. Let's get started there. Right? And this can be a great one. So demonstrating a gap in the research or a need to investigate a research question. So explicitly, you generally see this stated in the introduction and then revisited in the discussion or conclusion. And you can find the exact sentences where a writer is achieving this move. This move is also achieved implicitly by the writer's choices about things like what particular type of genre am I going to write? If they're writing a lit review or a state of the field, that's an implicit demonstration of the fact that they are using this move of addressing a gap in the research. Another thing that you're going to do, or another move you're going to find pretty often, both explicitly and implicitly, is demonstrating the viability and credibility of the method. So explicitly in your method section, you're going to talk about, here's why I'm using this method. You're going to include your citations to demonstrate that this method is a standard method that is understood and used commonly in your field. Implicitly, again, by deciding what genre you want to use and by choosing what types of research to include, or by using particular citations of the people in your field who are well respected, you're demonstrating the viability and credibility of your methodology as well. Questions about that part? I know that was a lot of information all at once, so let's take a minute or two to address anything you have questions or concerns or you want examples of, and you can say them out loud or you can put them in the chat. Are we feeling pretty solid about the idea of genre? Okay, what's a good way to find out the audience of the journal I'm writing for? That's an excellent question. Thank you, Lucia. So we're going to do that next. That's the next step that I have for you, is doing some guided research. So I have some research. I have a table that I'm going to let you fill out, where we can start figuring out how to answer these questions. So what I'd like you to do in the next, let's say, 20 minutes is to log into the Shields library via the VPN. And then I'd like you to, depending on your field and the type of research you're engaging in, look in either an appropriate database or find an appropriate journal. And I want you to start doing some research on that journal, or find some articles in your field or in your subtopic. Look for articles particularly that have a high impact factor, recent key findings, or that are the recipients of a reward for writing or research. Those can be some things to help you make sure that the one that you're looking at is a good example of the genre. So this is the next step, is I want you to log in, and you can use Google Scholar if you prefer, that's totally fine. And I want you to find some examples of articles in your field that you can tell are well written. And you can find them either by looking through a database or through a specific journal. If you know that you want to publish in a specific journal, let's find examples from that journal. Where can you easily find the impact factor for an article? Who can answer that question? One quick and easy thing you can do is you can look it up on Google Scholar, and you can look for the number of citations or hits on Google Scholar. If it's a more recent article, that can be a little bit tricky. If it's a longer article, you can also look at, or if it's an older article, you can also look at the author's page in Google Scholar, and that will often tell you their impact factor as well. You can also look it up in a lot of the databases will tell you too. And would you suggest writing intro at the end or right after results? I suggest writing it whenever it works for you. I like to do actually a couple of versions of my introduction. So I usually write a placeholder introduction at the beginning to give me guidance on knowing, okay, here's my research question. Here's my audience that I'm aiming for. Here's my purpose in writing this. And then I'll go and write the body. And then I'll go and revisit. I'll go back up to the introduction and I'll look and see, okay, am I meeting what I thought I was going to meet? Do I need to change or update my research question? Has it evolved? Has my purpose in writing this evolved? And then I'll update it. Then I'll continue working on the body, the discussion, and then I'll go back up and tweak it again and make sure that it's in keeping with everything that I'm actually talking about at the end. And yes, okay, so I think we've answered all those questions. Okay, so I've looked up the impact factor for entire journals. I wasn't aware that each article had a number generated. So yeah, the impact factor for a specific article, like I'm saying, is you can, sometimes if it's an older one, you can find a strong impact factor. Sometimes you can just kind of get a sense for it based on the citations. That's a really good question. How do you know what a high impact factor is for your field? All right, thoughts? How have the rest of you been able to tell? One thing you can do is you can just look it up. You can just say, hey, yep, exactly, you can. You can Google for what's a high impact factor in this field. Another thing you can do is you can look up something that you know is really, really credible and well-respected in your field. And you can look at the impact factor for that. And then you can base the impact factor. You can kind of set that as the bar and look at things depending on the impact factors. And at this point, don't get too hung up on impact factors. Think about do think about like what's credible and what publications are well respected, but not everywhere is going to be the best publishing experience for someone who's publishing some of their first articles. Some journals, even if they have less of an impact factor, will be much more supportive of a newer scholar. They'll give you more information. They'll give you more feedback. They'll give you revise and resubmits. So sometimes even if it doesn't have a super high impact factor compared to some other publications in your field, some journals might be a better choice. So that's something to look at too. And you can Google about those journals and you can see what other people have said for writing in those journals. And you can look up and see who the people are who've published in recent articles too, or in recent issues too. You can look and see, has this journal published articles by grad students recently, or do they only publish people by the top scholars in the field, right? All right, while you're looking for examples of articles in your field, please let me know if you want help doing some research, or if you'd prefer, I can put you in breakout rooms with each other and you can support each other and I can jump in and help. All right, has everyone been able to find an article that they can use to analyze the genre moves and conventions? Great. Excellent. So I have shared the link to both the slideshow and to the analysis table that we'll be using next. I'm going to share my slide or my screen as well. And let's talk about, now that you have found an article that you think is a good representation of this genre, how can you figure out how it's achieving the effectiveness? Okay, so there's a link to the STEM journal article analysis table there in the slides as well, and it's also in the chat box. Some things that you want to consider as you're filling out this analysis table. First of all, what types of articles are most commonly written by grad students in your program? What about by your advisor in your field? These are things to help you narrow down what article you want to look at and what you want to model your own articles after. You can also think about, why is this type of journal article the most appropriate for sharing your research project? What types of journal articles or journals will help you achieve your other professional goals? Which ones can be included as part of your thesis or dissertation project? What type of article is feasible for completing and publishing in your timeline? What article journals will help you to gain funding or find a postdoc or on the job market? And whenever possible, make sure that all of your projects meet multiple goals, okay? You're in some time constraints and you want to make sure that every project that you're doing is a project that's going to help you gain your overall goals. So, be really conscious of where you put your time and your energy. And if it's not something that's going to help you achieve some other goals, maybe save it for when you have a little bit more time. Oh wait, let's go back to the table. Need to exit the presentation and take us to, there we are. All right, did you all find the link to the table in the chat? Perfect. Okay, so you can either copy this or you can make your own version if it's laid out in a way that you're not comfortable with, but here are some questions to get you started. This is a double entry notebook setup. So what it does is it lets you look at the text with some questions and then write your answer in the next side so that you can be really conscious in making choices about the analysis that you're doing here. So first of all, go ahead and start filling out like, what genre of article is this? How can I tell that it's that genre? What cues am I seeing? What are the conventions of this genre that I'm seeing? Who are the text audiences? And how can you tell, right? Whenever possible, go ahead and put in an actual quote from the article that is the place in the text that tells you who is my audience. A lot of times the article will say like, other scholars can use this too, and you'll know, okay, this is aimed at other scholars who are working on this. Or it might talk about how people in related fields can apply it. So then again, that's another indication, oh, this is for these people. It might have a section about what are the larger implications. So then that tells you, oh, they're thinking about like mass audiences or science journalists too. So look for the places in the text where you can see that and start filling that out in your boxes. So go ahead and work your way through. And I'm going to put you in breakout rooms so that you can just have a smaller place where you can talk with each other. And I'll pop into each breakout room, and I'm happy to look at share your screens, look at analysis that you're doing, help, one-on-one or on small groups. Okay. Any questions before I put you into breakout rooms? All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming back. I hope you had a productive breakout room. So I have some final thoughts and some recommendations for you, and then I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions that anyone has as well. I'm also happy, I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and please feel free to contact me if you have questions or if you want to talk about any of these concepts or future readings, etc. chemstrom@ucdavis.edu. My name is Dr. Cassie Hemstrom, and you can just address me as Cassie. Okay, so some handy tools. If you have not found them yet, citation trackers are a lifesaver. There are a bunch of brainstorming apps too that you can use. And I'm happy to give like individual recommendations. There's note collection apps too. Annotated bibliographies are super helpful, especially if you have a bigger project that's going on. There's time management apps if you need some things to help you do like the Pomodoro style writing, if you just need like that extra motivation. Time management apps are a great tool. Also, please do not neglect your own well-being, both emotionally and physically. Grad school is incredibly intense. Writing is very stressful. Take breaks, go for walks. You will feel more creative. You will come up with better ideas, and you can return refreshed to writing. Don't feel like you are not being productive if you're not sitting in front of your computer writing 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day. All right. You have to make sure that you're putting back into yourself what you're taking out with writing. Here's some useful texts that I would recommend if you have questions about follow-up things, or if you really enjoyed the approach that we used today. Here are some links, and these are linked in the slides that I give you too, so you can follow them. Let's see, I think Leah asked a question about, is it more important to write in an academic, like formal language, or is it okay to write more clearly? This book by Helen Sword, Stylish Academic Writing, y'all, I cannot recommend this book enough. It is an intensive study of the types of writing that we prefer in academic journal articles versus the types of writing that we actually see. And the findings are that we prefer to read straightforward, clear language, especially when you're dealing with complex thoughts. If you can shorten your sentences down, use like less weird passive construction, use active construction that says things like, we did this and here is what we found. People prefer to read those. So that's a really, really helpful book. Writing Science, how to write papers that get cited and proposals that get funded, Scientist Guide to Writing, The Craft of Scientific Writing, and Science Research Writing for Non-Native Speakers of English. All of these are incredibly, incredibly helpful texts that I strongly recommend. And remember, Closing thoughts. Remember to focus on, in your writing, your purpose, your audience, your organization, your argument, your support, clarity, synthesizing sources and research, and genre. Don't worry, especially in first drafts, about grammar. Don't worry about using academic language. Definitely don't worry about getting it right in the first draft. And also, don't try to get it perfect in the last draft. Anytime you send that off, you're going to get feedback. You're going to have to do revisions. And if you get a full rejection, okay, that's not super helpful, but you send it off to somewhere else, and hopefully, at the very least, they'll give you some feedback, right? And then you can use that feedback to revise it again. And this is just the process of academic writing. Everybody gets rejections. Everybody gets feedback, and then we use that feedback to make those drafts better. So never get so stuck in trying to make it perfect or in trying to use perfect grammar or perfect academic language that you are putting up roadblocks to your own research and to your own thought process. All right. Just get those things out on the page. Don't try and write it in a straightforward from the beginning to end fashion. Write it in the ways that work for you. Use the strategies that work for you. And remember that you can revise it as many times as you need to. Okay. But don't just keep revising it. Eventually actually send it off. All right, y'all, I had so much fun with you. Thank you so much for attending this workshop. It's just so motivating for me to hear about the projects that everybody is working on. I really appreciate you joining, and thank you. Please stick around if you have any questions, but if not, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Bye, y'all.
Thanks, Cassie. I have a quick question about the tools to use, whether it's brainstorming or drafting.
Yes.
Obviously, we're regarding drafting Microsoft Word, although, it's my frenemy.
Yeah.
Like LaTeX, I don't know if anyone uses that to actually draft, but yeah, I guess I'm looking for recommendations / input on that.
So I actually prefer Google Docs, because Google Docs will keep track of your previous versions of things. So if you end up cutting something out that you really need back in, you can go into the version history and you can find it and pull it back out. And you can do everything with track changes in Google Docs that you can do in Word, but you can delete it and then it'll still be there in the deleted comments section. So you can find and recover anything at any point. And I love that for drafting, because I don't have to feel paralyzed by getting rid of something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Not wanting to get rid of something you may have spent half an hour, 45 minutes writing.
Exactly.
And regretting it.
Exactly. I also really, really love doing double entry notebooks like we did for the table. And I also super love doing mind maps, especially if I have a pretty complicated idea about something that I need to visualize. How do I want to lay out this argument? What are some of the things that I want to talk about in this? So for that, lucid chart is really handy.
Okay, yeah, I think I've definitely heard of it. I don't think I've actually used it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's through Google. So it's, you just sign in with your Gmail account or your Google account. And it's particularly good at either the beginning of a drafting where you're trying to think about, here's all these ideas and I just don't know how to connect them all together. Or if you've got kind of a messy structure and you want to do a little bit of reverse outlining to see how you might better compose that draft, that organization. So that's really helpful. I also use canva.com, which is free online design software, and you can use that to do mind maps. They also have templates for things like infographics that can be really helpful. They have templates for posters too, if you're going to do a poster session. So that's helpful for brainstorming for me. I use it a lot for brainstorming, but I also use it for presentations and stuff.
Awesome. Thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. thank you so much for coming and for being such an active participant. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Rudia. I'm so glad that you found it helpful. Yeah, honestly, I know most of the people who are doing workshops this year, and they are fantastic. I think Catherine Gossett is doing a couple that are geared towards more technical and science writing as well. So look out for any from her. I'm not doing any more this year, but I might do some for dissertation day next year. I have some presentations that I've done on writing like a long-term project. And so there's some other ones that are listed for that throughout the year too, that are really helpful. And feel free to, contact me if you have questions too. I'm happy to connect you to folks or to answer questions, whatever I can do to help.